Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by filmmaker Doug Block, whose work includes 112 Weddings, The Children Next Door, and 51 Birch Street, as well as a producer for numerous documentaries, and he runs the DWord for Documentary Filmmakers in New York. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thanks, Gordon.
I guess, okay, I have to ask this question because I really enjoyed the documentary, Tony B. Tiles, The Resurrect the Dead. How did that come to be? Because you were the producer on it.
Yeah, I mean, officially executive producer. It's a funny story. I mean, I got a DWord member emailed me out of the blue one Thanksgiving, and the subject header said, "Help, my film just got into Sundance." He was cleaning houses. He had no money left. It was his first feature. He sent it to them over the transom on the last day of submissions, and had no idea what to do next. And so I said, "Send me the film," and I loved it. I mean, just loved it. So I just said, "Let me help out," and I took executive producer credit because I didn't want. I figured if I took producer credit, I would just get sucked in, do far more work than I had time for. But I should have, because executive producers, everybody just thinks I gave them money. Well, I didn't give a cent. I didn't.
And do you get lots of calls now, being like, "I saw that you gave money to Tony B."
Yeah, right. No, not enough people have seen it. I mean, it's a crime. It's such a fun, entertaining, beautifully done story. So hopefully a few more people will now see it because of it. Resurrect Dead, the mystery of the Tony B. Tiles.
How did, had you seen the tiles before, or was this something new to
you? I vaguely crossed my consciousness, but once I knew about them, of course, I looked for them everywhere and found them everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's like such an intriguing story, and great characters. He followed them for years and years, and one of those kind of handmade films, if you know what I mean, that so stylish but kind of lo-fi, we call it. This age of Netflix and streaming movies where everything has to look like a Hollywood fiction film with drone shots and dolly shot interviews with multiple cameras. I mean, this is just like a guy holding his camera and really digging into the story, and it's just such a charming film.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. Now back to the show. You mentioned it earlier, you got this through DWord, or they came to you through DWord. Can you tell us about that? What is that? How do people learn more about it?
Yeah, well, the DWord's an online community of documentary professionals worldwide. It's free. It's been around for 23 years. It started on a whim. Back in '99, I'd been doing a blog that I called the DWord since '97, when I was partway through making a film called Homepage, which was about the internet's first kind of recognized blogger, Justin Hall, who convinced me to put up my own blog, and I started blogging about the making of the film while I was making the film, which is an idiotic thing to do. I think I was one of the first idiots to do that. Many more have since followed. by 99, it was in distribution. I felt like I couldn't really honestly talk about what assholes, I was encountering and how frustrating. Well, I could talk about the frustrations, but, couldn't name names and, you know, bring out the skeletons and all that. So around that time, I'd gotten into virtual community and spoke with a friend who said, "Oh, I kept saying, documentary filmmakers would make such a great virtual community. They're generous and empathetic, and they are, they really don't feel like you have to lose for them to win."
Yeah.
It's not like dog eat dog, which the fictional world can be, isn't always, but can be.
Mhm.
And I just thought they'd be like a great community, make for a great virtual community. And he said, "Oh, well, I know somebody who can put us up and host us, and we could be up tomorrow." And we were up
Oh,
tomorrow. It was like August 31st, 1999. And
wow.
23 years later, we've now got almost 23,000 members from 158 countries.
Wow.
And we've never advertised or promoted or done, very few articles have ever been written about it. It's all been word of mouth or
Wow.
search engines and stuff like that. So it's and now we're pivoting from an online discussion forum. The past 2.5 years, every Friday at noon, we've been holding a free Zoom event for our members where, half the time we network and support each other and go into breakout rooms and help each other advance their projects. And the other half, we have special guests coming in, sharing their expertise, and we moderate part and then open it up for Q&As. So, and it's free.
Wow. How can they get involved with that if they want?
Just go to d-word.com and you'll get all the information to join. And yeah, you just have to, you apply for pro membership, what we call, and you just have to convince us that you have some professional experience or you have enough related experience in an interesting field. We just try not to register students because we don't want to ask, keep answering beginner questions. So.
Wow. Now, you how do you go about choosing your topics for your films when you're directing?
They just kind of find me, like, what am I interested in at the time or need to know at the time? Like my first film, The Heck with Hollywood, followed 3 first-time filmmakers as they finished up and then tried to get their first films out into distribution. And it was all about me at the time, wondering how the hell do I go from being a camera person to a director, which I always wanted to be. How do you get through that catch-22 that, particularly at the time when it was on film, films are like hugely expensive to make, but how do you raise the money without having a track record of success? But how do you get that track record of success without raising a gobful of money for your first film? It was a really interesting question that I thought had everything to do with the American dream, that if you just want something badly enough, you'll find a way. And so I found 3 filmmakers and 3 films that found a way to get the money by hook or by crook. And they all kind of came together at a market for selling films. And I thought I would just film at the market, but it turns out I had to follow them into the world, and that took another couple of years. So that, that came out of like my own question of how do you become a first-time filmmaker? The success of that, opened up some doors, and I wound up actually producing for a couple of other filmmakers in between because they actually thought I knew something about producing from having done my first and getting it out pretty widely. And what I loved about producing for others, I'm really picky about it. And it's hard for me to talk about how fabulous my own films are, whether I think so or not. It's just like I hate humble bragging and all that. But when I work on another film, like Silver Lake Life came right after that, and then Jupiter's Wife, 2 fantastic films. I mean, that I had to be a part of, you know, and Resurrect Dead was the same way. It's like, I just, you know, I saw the samples, I knew the filmmakers, and I just said, I need to, I won't forgive myself if I'm not involved. And what's great is, I mean, my pitch is always the same to funders or distributors or sales agents, whatever, which is like, I hate producing. I hate producing. I wouldn't be involved producing this film if I didn't think it was like an amazing film that just has to be seen. And, you know, it's kind of work because I totally believe it, but I, you know, and I have a hard time saying that about my own films. You know, God, you have to see it. I'm such a genius. Whoa, you know. Doesn't quite work. And homepage came out of my interest in the internet. You know, it was just blossoming. It was year 3 of the internet, and I thought it was going to change the way we communicate with each other. And in fact, that was kind of the heart of it. And you know, these all take off in kind of a different direction once you get going. 51 Birch Street came out of my, you know, homepage became a personal documentary unintentionally because this guy Justin, you know, encouraged me to start my own blog, and the blog became personal and the film became personal. At that time, my mother died suddenly. My father, quickly remarried. I mean, really quickly remarried a former secretary, which left us all wondering. And they sold the family house to move down to Florida. And I found in the moving, you know, 3 boxes of my mother's diaries going back to that time. So I didn't even intend to make that a film, but you know, when I came across the diaries, it somehow became that. So, you know, I did a film about my daughter, you know, her last year at home before leaving for college. But I've been shooting footage with her over the years. And, you know, that was a film I had in mind for many, many years, you know, this idea of her leaving the nest and what it's like as a parent to bring up a child and then have, you know, they have the audacity to leave home, leaving you with an empty nest. And what's that whole period about? But it used the old footage as memory. And we went back and forth in time. And finally, 112 Weddings was based on and for decades, I've been shooting weddings on the side to support my documentaries. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be good to go back to a bunch of the couples and see how their marriages are doing? So I went back to 9 of them while I followed one going through their wedding. And that premise is so interesting. We sold out every screening on the festival circuit before, you know, went on to HBO, just on the 1-sentence description. I mean, even men found it interesting. So yeah, it just kind of evolves out of it. And now I'm doing a film called Betty and Henri, about what happened when I discovered by chance a love letter in one of our used travel books that goes back decades, and all I have to go on is their first names. And I decided the circumstances under which I found it were very coincidental and meaningful. I felt like I have to find who these people are, even though I know I never will because I only have first names, and God knows I'm not a detective. And that's the fun of it. And it's been the wildest ride. And it's been like, you know, it's really more about fate and faith and serendipity and all those, you know, unsolved mysteries and all these things that are very rich and, you know, the stuff of life, and, you know, but all hinging on this detective story of me going about trying to find this couple.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question, Gordon?
I think so. I do have one question that comes out of that, and that is, what is the craziest thing you've seen at a wedding as someone who shoots weddings regularly?
You know, you'd think I hear all sorts of stories about crazy things that happen. You know, like apparently the father of a bride got caught stealing the wallet of the father of the groom at one wedding. I mean, I hear from photographers over dinner, you know, like these.
Yeah.
I don't have crazy stories. I'm the good luck charm. Everybody has like a flawless wedding when I'm I'm there. I'm not saying it's always the most exciting wedding,
Yeah.
but I've been to a few, like, I don't know. I just find it really fascinating to be with a couple I don't know and be like feet away from them shooting verite.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. I work as a single person crew. I do the sound. I don't use lights unless I absolutely have to. And they generally forget about me after 5 minutes. And I'm like eavesdropping on this couple on like the biggest day of their lives, and it's like super interesting
Yeah.
and fun and, just fascinating to see the dynamics of two families playing out.
Hmm.
And, it's high stakes because, you only
Yeah.
have one shot to get, the footage right. So, it's kind of at the end of the night, I'm usually really tired because I'm like so focused. I mean, for the longest time, I didn't have the ability, the time to edit these things. So I would cut in the camera, and every
Hmm.
wedding video was like edited in the camera. So I would like wait for sentences to be finished, and then I would stop, and if music was playing, I'd cut on the beat.
Yeah.
And music was playing while people were talking. I'm like thinking, okay, do I go for the music or the sentence? But it like worked. I mean, I was
Yeah.
always really fascinated by how well editing in the camera and straight cuts worked. I always loved the films of this kind of underground filmmaker, George Kuchar.
Okay.
He did
What's
these films in high 8, these
yeah.
diary-like films, and beautifully shot and edited in the camera, all straight cuts. And it was just, I don't know, I think it kind of influenced my thinking about that. Very few times would I have gone back. I mean, really, all I ever cut out was those times when I accidentally had the camera on, didn't realize it, and you'd see my feet for 2 minutes, or I turned the corner and the bride and her bridesmaids are all smoking cigarettes, and
Yeah.
I'm like, no, 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 our parents don't know we smoke. So, other
Well,
than that, it would all be in.
so what's interesting is it sounds so you take a lot of stuff from your life, like you talked about documenting your daughter, you talked about these weddings is part of your work. Like, are you? I guess like how do you approach a project? Because it feels like part of it is you're documenting your life or things around you constantly, and then something sort of piques your interest, or is it like you think of something and then you go and start collecting the information?
I don't document my life constantly. Actually, since my daughter graduated, and went to
Hmm.
college, I I take far more photos. I rarely actually shoot video.
Yeah.
I've gotten deep into like taking photos on my iPhone and playing around, using Instagram filters and resizing the image and playing with color saturation. And now I shoot through like a plastic bag to get like soft focus and blur effects. I love doing that. But I did when my daughter was home, growing up. I didn't shoot a lot, but
Hmm.
I shot whenever I got together with my family. I would take out, I take my video camera and I'd usually shoot like for about 10 minutes,
Yeah.
15 minutes. They'd all go like, my parents and my sister would all go, "Oh, Douglas," and
Yeah.
then I'd start shoot. After a minute, they'd just like forget about it. And, it was mostly just, normal interaction. I was more interested in
Yeah.
that than like, oh, we're at Passover and we're sitting around the
Yeah.
table thing, or a birthday or something.
Yeah.
I wanted to, like my daughter got her ears pierced when she was 9. She desperately wanted to get their ears pierced. So, I went with the camera and got a close up as, the thing went into her ear. And then, on the way back, I said, "So, do you feel grown up now?" And she goes, "Oh, I don't know. Somehow I feel like my whole life has changed." And as
Yeah.
she said the word changed, like we were driving in the city and like sunlight came out from between the buildings and, lit her up.
Yeah.
Instead, she said, "My life has changed," and so that obviously went in the movie. But like,
Yeah.
it's kind of typical of, I would just, that's the kind of stuff like I really liked shooting.
Yeah.
And I always thought someday this might be a film. And
Hmm.
I started out as a camera person. So,
Yeah.
I didn't shoot home video the way, most people would, standing planted and zooming in and out. I would move around and get different
Yeah.
angles and close-ups and wide shots and, elegant pans. So I always figured, if I ever do use this in a movie someday, I kind of like it to look good and elegant and
Yeah.
cinematic.
Now, I'd like to know, like we have a lot of young people watching these shows or these
Oh, really?
videos
Oh,
who want to get into film.
oh, okay.
So, is there something that you learned in your career that you're like, I wish I'd known that when I started, that you could pass on knowledge wise?
Wow, I don't know, I'm sort of the, you know, leap before you look person. If you know too much about how hard it is and what the odds are against how long it takes to make a documentary and raise the money for it and get it out into the world, God, you'd never do it. So I think there's certain amount of naivete that's very important, and
Hmm.
and totally ludicrous blind faith that somehow, if only 1 in 100 films will get out into the world, you're going to be that one.
Yeah.
Um, so, what would I do differently? I don't know. I think what I do differently is I never had a mentor, and I didn't go to film school.
Yeah.
So I just broke in by getting as many odd jobs as I could, PA'd for a long time, did some sound. I started doing assistant editing back in the film days. It transitioned to video, and I learned video editing, but then I became a staff cameraman at a place and started, it just, um, but I never had that one person to kind of learn the ropes from. And I think if I had to do it over again, advice I'd give is find somebody whose work you really admire
Hmm.
and write them and just say, look, I'm starting in, do you need help? Can I intern for you? Can I take your laundry to the cleaners?
Yeah.
Can I draw, can I walk your dog? Can I just want to be around you and learn from you, Mr. Spielberg.
Yeah.
Um, and it may take 20 letters or emails or something, but like, particularly if documentaries, find, you know, like I always admired the work of Ross McElwee. He was the filmmaker who made me realize documentaries could be as interesting and auteur driven and
Hmm.
director driven and story driven and funny, as a fiction film. So I would have written him, although he was actually my age, so he's maybe not the best example. But if I were young and starting
Yeah.
out, it's like, Mr. McElwee, can I, work for you in some capacity?
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of doing it. Or if you're looking to get into fiction films, try and get on a set, but not as a PA. 'Cause I found as a PA, they were always like making me go out on runs, and
Yeah.
everywhere but on the set. And that was no fun. I was on a Brian De Palma film in the dead of winter, freezing my ass off, blocks away from the action, telling people not to walk, through the frame, and having to explain 100 times it's Dress to Kill with Michael Caine and Angie Dickinson, and we really appreciate your help by not walking through, crossing the street. That was not a great learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
A guilty pleasure film. How, you know, I shouldn't even say guilty because I think it's actually a really great film, but I love the film Notting Hill.
Oh, yeah. That's a great film.
Yeah, I mean, it's so stylishly done and it's fun, and I mean, I really like romantic comedies,
Hmm.
in part because I mean, in a sense, I'm making a romantic comedy with Betty and Henri.
Yeah.
just a documentary, but it's and you know, it's just so. I mean, every time I notice it on TV, if I'm channel surfing, I always go on it, and I just can't stop watching. So I've probably seen it all the way through a bunch of times, but I've seen it part way through like a million times, and like Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. I mean, they're like amazing. You know, just like they had such great chemistry together.
Yeah.
I love that film. So is that guilty enough?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
You're quite welcome and a pleasure. And you young people out there, good luck to you.
Well, that's it for this week. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com. Of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.